Well, Dell, thank you so much for helping with my project, and I really appreciate the. Oh, I should turn off the background so I can show. Um, there we go. Thank you so much for sending me the L5 news. I was reading through this, and it feels like something that could have been written today.
It could have been.
It's like the same issues about the economic drivers for space colonization, communicating with the public. Um, uh,
You know what the purpose of the L5 Society was, do you not?
to create uh, like Jerry O'Neill, wrote a book called The High Frontier, and L5 Liberation Point is, I guess just but behind the moon, right? Um,
Behind it, yeah, but trailing in orbit. But the stated purpose of the society was to disband at the first meeting that could be held at that point by him in a human colony.
to disband, you said?
Yes.
Oh, what do you mean by that?
I mean that once there was a human colony at the L5 point and they were able to hold a meeting there, they would have succeeded with having a colonized space and they were to disband at that first meeting.
Well, yeah, it's a shame that hasn't happened yet. It's still a lot of work.
I keep holding my breath, but I don't think I'll see it.
Um, so I was wondering if we could start off by maybe having you say a little bit about yourself, just to provide some context to your views.
Well, I was born at a very early age, and I thought I wanted to be an astronomer when I was in elementary school. I got a 30 power refractor. Did not really have a good concept for the size of the Earth and the height of orbits. So I convinced my daddy I should go out and watch the Vanguard 1 launching in 1957. And of course, not realizing we'd never see it over the curvature of the Earth. But I watched the moon and wanted to have a bigger telescope, but I soon lost track of being an astronomer and I got interested in the space programs. I've been a supporter ever since.
How old were you when Neil and Buzz landed on the moon in 1969?
I was in the desert on bivouac in the U.S. Army in basic training. Excuse me. And we were supposed to have 2 more days out there in the desert. And they all of a sudden told us to break camp, load up, and head for the bus point. And we had no clue what we were going back for early, but we knew something must be terribly wrong. And so we got back to the barracks and they told us to go turn our weapons in and report to the day room. And that was a misnomer. You didn't turn your weapons in before they were clean. And we had a day room that had a big color TV set in it, but it would not hold 400 men. It would only hold about, I guess 40 or 50 if they got real cozy together. And that's when we found out that moon landing had occurred, and we were getting to see Walter Cronkite narrate what all we had missed. So everybody else was elated. I stayed in the day room and soaked it up until I think I understood what the process had been, and was tickled, but knew I wasn't going to get to be any closer than what I was on that day room television.
What did you think at the time?
I was glad we beat the Russians. I mean, that was the big Cold War effort. And that's what we were in the Army for, was to beat the Russians, and we beat the Russians to the moon. So,
Um, is it something that y'all had anticipated before that moment? I mean, like how much was it talked about?
well, I was aware of the Apollo program before, but when you're in basic training in the Army, you think day to day. You don't think about all those things you left behind in civilian life. So it was a kind of surprise to me.
Um, when did you find out that we were planning to send people back to the moon in 2024?
I've been hearing that for the past 5 or 10 years from this politician and that politician, and oh, we're going to build up the space program, and no, we're not. And I'll believe it when I see it, but that's the only thing I think Donald Trump might have going for him is he's said that, but he's lied about everything else so far, so I don't really believe it.
Um, I mean, what do you think about the goal in itself, regardless of kind of like the plans behind it? Is it something that's worthwhile?
Well, of course it's worthwhile, but it's like any other frontier. You mentioned O'Neill in the book about the frontiers, just like Star Trek in the final frontier and to go where no man has boldly gone before. If you stop and think about the exploration of the so-called New World, the governments were the only entities that had the financial resources to finance campaigns to go over the seas or go into space. And until the governments turned loose of their control or lost their control, it was all a government push. Now we have Elon Musk and SpaceX and Falcon and the same thing. We have entities that can afford to go that are not governmental entities, but the governments are going to still say that they're passing laws and regulating who can own the moon and who can own asteroids. And it's going to be a who gets there first and who decides to make the political effort to protect their investment.
Um, I mean, how much more, how much closer? I mean, I've read the entire 1984 L5 news, and it's amazing that a lot of the articles in here. I mean, this is 2 years before the Challenger disaster, and there's a lot of optimistic talk about going to Mars and you know mining the moon and asteroids and getting people excited about it and all that other things. And then we kind of see the history since 1984 to just recently, and it's like we really don't have that much to show for it.
No, we don't. In 1983, the National Space Society held its annual meeting in Houston. And I got to go attend that, got to meet Robert Hyman, among other people, and attended a lot of their special programs on what we were going to do, what we had the technology, the knowledge to do, but not the financial backing to do. And like you say, there hasn't been much progress at all in that area. We have turned back toward low Earth orbit, Earth exploration, and then we've put in our money into planetary exploration by unmanned projectiles. So there hasn't really been any effort to colonize space in the last 50 years. It's all been, let's see what we can get this to pay for. We sold the weather satellites to private income outfits so that you have to buy the weather data now. And it's been a fiasco as far as colonization of space is concerned. I feel like we need to concentrate on getting to the moon and learning to survive there before we think about putting a man on Mars and having him survive. There'll be somebody that'll go and they'll die there first, but eventually we'll have space colonies on the moon and on Mars.
But it's funny, I talked to people who were kids during the Apollo era, and the sense I get from them was at that time it felt like space colonization was just right around the corner. And now pretty much everybody I talk to, they're like, oh, it eventually happened, but it'll probably be my children's children. We kind of kick it out even further. But um, I don't, I mean, what changes over the course of that time that couldn't change right now to make it happen?
Right now, our space program is funded by people who 435 of them can only see 2 years into the future, and 100 of them can only see 6 years into the future. And the budget signed off by the president has a 4-year term. And when you've got people controlling the budget on those shorter increments, you're not going to have any long range plans. You know, we've got some private enterprises that are not constrained by those short term intervals and more worried about raising money for reelection than they are about putting a man on the moon or a man on Mars. So I think it's going to be a hybrid effort. You're going to see the private enterprise probably get back to the moon and initiate a colony. How successful the first colonies will be in respect to human mortality, I don't know. We're going to lose some people, but that's always happened on the frontier. And the people who take the risk are the ones that go first. And the ones that survive are the ones that come out on top, and they get control of the resources from having been there and having gotten established first.
Yeah, I just kind of like the societal impact of those people in the frontier dying is a lot different than the people we send to the moon, where they'll have their own Facebook page, Twitter page, Instagram account, you know, multiple hours a week. They're like in this, you know, people are watching them. You know, I mean, the faceless, nameless people that died on the frontier, largely it feels like they didn't have an impact on anybody because nobody even knew that they died until, you know, you come across some sign saying rest in peace. But
True, but that's the change in communications. That's not so much a change in socialization.
I guess you know, our impulse in the past, anytime that we experience some type of disaster with regards to space, is just to put a halt on the entire program. If we're going to have deaths in space, how do we keep that from happening?
I don't think you're going to keep that from happening. But today, if you have another space disaster, there's going to be all the bleeding hearts. They shut the program down and try to figure out why we just can't afford a loss. And there's going to be people say, leave, father, get the hell out of the way. And they're going to go ahead and find the resources to get out there and take their risk. And some of them will die, some of them will be remembered in history, but eventually we will have enough people going that, like you say, there won't be remembering those mindless people that fell by the wayside. The ones that survived are the ones that's going to get remembered. That's a risk you take.
And you mentioned kind of some characteristics of our political, public policy, public budget system in terms of the short-term thinking. And you know, looking at China as an example, they don't quite have the same type of limitations. They've been steadily making progress towards a multi-decade-old plan of space development and exploration. How do you see that race sort of playing out?
China has a 5-year plan that they revise every 5 years. And they have the ability to keep thinking ahead of that because they can have a dictator that's locked in there for life. They're not dependent upon short-term elections. So I foresee that the Chinese will probably be in a tight race with the private enterprise to get back there. What I foresee happening is that they'll both be there, our private enterprise and their state enterprise. And then we're going to see a lot of laws passed that have no meaning up there. And it'll eventually come to a political battle, and the lawyers will win, and people on the moon will probably lose. But progress moves in slow steps, and we'll just have to work through those.
If it was safe and affordable, would you take a trip to space?
Of course. But more likely, at my age, I would give it to some young, bright individual that I thought could do something to get inspired and go back and make some changes. At my stage in my life, I think it would be a waste to send me.
I was thinking of a program called High School Astronaut, with the goal of taking one person from each high school and giving them the astronaut experience. Because I was like thinking high schoolers are so, I mean, you've been growing up with your peers for like a decade. So if anybody can communicate a unique experience to another group of humans, it's probably that person in their high school.
Well, you remember the Young Astronauts program. I remember the piece you wrote for the Golden Triangle Tabloid about that. And yeah, I think that you probably have more of a possibility to influence the younger set than I do.
I don't know. I, I, uh, I'm, I always thought getting old would happen to other people.
Uh-huh. And I still think that. I don't understand why all of my high school buddies got old and I didn't.
Yeah, it's really weird. I mean, those unfortunate people.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thinking that you'll be here with the rest of us.
I know.
Yep. So why waste a trip to space on an old coot like me? I would give it to somebody in high school.
Oh, what do you think about longevity and life extension and regenerative therapies? I mean, do you see those things as being just right around the corner, and what we think of as being kind of a fixed lifetime extends on indefinitely?
No, I don't see that the human lifespan is going to increase terribly much. And two, if you go into space and you suffer the radiation problems, that's going to be another setback that we're going to have to learn to live with. I'm sure that we'll figure out ways around it technologically. But our bodies are like every other animal bodies. They're designed to wear out after so long. And we're going to have to learn to live with that.
Our
Quality of life after you get to be 40 and 12 or whatever it is deteriorates pretty rapidly.
Now, have you been keeping up with SpaceX's Starship development down there in Brownsville, Texas?
Yeah, we were staying at Mother Neff State Park and noticed that there was a sign. They have their development test launch facility just outside of Mother Neff State Park. And of course, when they light off one of those things, all the birds get up and fly around for an hour or two trying to figure out what the hell happened. But yeah, I keep up with it to an extent, not in detail.
But Elon is talking about this vehicle will be able to carry 100 people into space, 100% reusable, and cheaper than any spacecraft ever created before to launch. And being able to use the same spacecraft to launch 3 times a day, and having a factory down there that could produce 2 of them per week, and doing all of this within the next few years. It seems like that's even if he's able to do half of that, would be a game changer.
It would, but you follow the Tesla, he's made some changes and things that, the Detroit group just does not think is real. They didn't feel like he would ever get it off the ground. So I kind of admire Elon in some of his plans.
Yeah. Did you watch his battery day where he went over kind of like the improvements they were doing with regards to creating battery cells?
I don't watch hardly any television. So no, I've seen things in the newspaper and in the Science News Weekly, but I don't watch television.
Oh, when growing up, I remember, the BBS used to run Parliament Opus. I was wondering what became of that.
It died when the internet came along. People
What?
got so all online and bulletin boards went by the wayside.
Oh, about what year was that?
Oh, it's right around. I got on the internet in 1990. I guess it was around 1990, but I don't remember it explicitly.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think that this decade is going to be the space exploration what the 1990s were to the internet. Do you think that's overly optimistic, or you think we might actually have the materials to make that happen?
When you say the space exploration, we've already explored space in low Earth orbit till it there's not a whole lot new under the sun. We've gone into low Earth orbit and pointed everything we can think of back down to do remote sensing. And we have a pretty large database of what's growing and what's not and where. And now that we're into a rapid climate change, I think you're going to see a little bit more focus on the climate problems that we've encountered. But until we start putting payloads outside of low Earth orbit into the lunar orbit, I don't think that there's going to be a whole lot of change. And I'm not sure that the U.S. government is going to be leading the way there. I think the U.S. government has pretty much resigned itself to, let's outsource this and let the smart guys do it. The bureaucracy is choking them down.
Yeah, along those lines, have you heard of the Commercial Lunar Payload Services program?
Not specifically that I recall.
Yeah, so NASA has a couple of bits of equipment and experiments and stuff they want to put on the surface of the moon. Instead of taking the more traditional approach of building the lander and launching the rocket and everything, they decided to have private companies bid to kind of just deliver their equipment to the moon, sort of like you would get a package delivered.
Yeah, and, okay. I remember reading about that, but I didn't remember the name.
Well, next year, Intuitive Machines in Houston is landing a probe on the moon, and so is Astrobotic from Pittsburgh. And as part of the program, you're free to do whatever you want to with any additional capacity that you have. And Astrobotics is doing a promotion with DHL, the package delivery firm. Mm-hmm. So you could buy a moon box for, you could deliver like a little micro SD card sized object to the moon for about $450. And I got a terabyte card, which is really kind of mind blowing. I'm planning to put all these videos on it, so you'll be on the moon next year.
I can hardly wait. That's like my name's supposed to be on a Pioneer something, another gold disc is headed out into outside the solar system. I don't really get a lot of excitement out of that. National Space Society, and I forget who else it was, they had all those promotions back in the 80s. Re-up and renew your membership, and your name will be encoded in sent to space.
Yeah, I know. It's kind of it's probably more of a gesture than anything else, because between the radiation and the heat and everything else, and just the mere fact that I don't even have a DVD player to play some of the DVDs I have. I could just see some future generation seeing this saying they have no clue what it is.
Well, just like the 33 1/3 RPM gold record that's on Pioneer 17, who's going to have a record player on the other end?
Oh, exactly. They'll be like, wow, these people really wrote a very weird thing. They're trying to figure out what it is. So what's the, a lot of people say, why are we spending all this money on space when we have issues of global climate change and poverty and social justice and, just name whatever issue you want. But at the same token, we live like so comfortable lives, I mean, I think my life now is way more comfortable than it was like 20 years ago. It feels like society has just become a whole bunch of spoiled people who don't like any type of, that don't have any greater ambition than to be more comfortable. And I was just wondering if you see the same thing, or.
I don't think society is going to change. You're always going to have people that want to improve things at home where they can see the improvement. And you're always going to have people that are looking up saying, golly, we could go there. And never the twain shall meet.
We just have to keep them from, the first group from inhibiting the second group, I guess.
I don't think you'll ever prevent them. They're always going to be vocalizing that they don't want to go to space. They want things to change here. And you're going to have to let the frontiersmen go to the frontier and let the farmers stay in farm.
Yeah, it's. I think that's probably true. Yeah, I'm just. Does it surprise you that we actually found water ice on the poles of the moon? about 10 years ago?
No, I've read enough science fiction to suspect that there's probably some there for the last 30, 40 years. A lot of that kind of stuff is you wait for the science fiction people, the science people to catch up with the science fiction people. It's like the senator said some months ago, who could have ever foreseen a pandemic like this? Well, anybody that reads science fiction, but like Asimov said, only intelligent people read science fiction, not politicians.
It's funny, there's an article in here where it actually talks about in passing that there could be ice in the poles of the moon. So it's just kind of,
I haven't read that for 30 years, so I'll take your word for it.
yeah, I just read it like an hour ago, so it's fresh on my mind.
I used to read them religiously when I got them. Too much stuff now on the net. I have to limit my reading time to what I think I can filter in.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Do you know if there's an archive someplace with all the articles? I know some of the select articles are on the National Space Society, but not the full journal.
Nathan, I don't know. I would expect that the National Space Society would have made some kind of deal with the L5 Society when they combined to archive that for posterity, but that's politics. So there's always two factions in every field, and there's the people on the left-hand side that want to lean right, and the people on the right-hand side that want to lean left. And when they get together and somebody coercively says, well, that was their program, I'm not interested in that, it falls by the wayside. So I can't answer that.
Yeah. So what are your prospects or you're thinking of humanity 500 years from now? Do you think we're still stuck here on Earth, or that we have actually branched out into the rest of the solar system? Are we still around? What do you think?
I think in 500 years, we will have made it to the extent to the solar system, and we'll be talking about something that outside the solar system if we haven't developed a faster than light drive by that time. But now there's the naysayers that say nothing can travel faster than light. I don't know that I believe that yet. It's just like, how would you have convinced someone from 150 years ago that you could send messages, voice, and pictures through the air? They didn't have the vocabulary, the understanding. We have a limited set of tools that Einstein left us, and it says you can't do this, but we don't even know what else is out there that we don't know. So I expect that as technology advances, we'll be developing tools to get out there. So 500 years from now, I could see us looking outside the solar system. I would expect that by that time we'll be out in the outer reaches and have probably the frontiersmen and the miners will have pulled all of the metals they can out of everything, and the economy will be based on a whole lot of different things that we can't even imagine now.
I know a lot of people were into like graphic arts and gaming and stuff, and those are like first-rate careers now. It's somebody's gonna be yeah, it's kind of really amazing. So what gives you hope that the future is going to turn out well?
Why shouldn't I? I'm an optimistic person. I could be pessimistic and say, no, we're going to have a nuclear war and wipe out humanity and it's all going to go back to the Stone Age. But I tend to be optimistic about things. I think that the intelligent people will manage to squeak by regardless of what the masses try to drag them down with.
I hope you're right. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate the time. Is there anything else that you wanted to talk about?
No, if my great grandkids are watching, hi. If not, well, it's been fun.
I'm sure they will be watching, so that'd be great.
Well, I hope so. Thanks, Nathan.
Well, thanks, Del. I hope to talk to you sooner than 25 years from now.
All right, you got a deal.
Okay, bye-bye.